Okay, what is up there YouTube? This is a J-Man Time, and today I have a video on some secret Italian and Austro-Hungarian weapons that were only unveiled at the very end of World War I. And these are some secret naval vessels that were considered advanced for their time, but ultimately failed in terms of their concept and deployment. And these are the Italian and Austro-Hungarian tracked torpedo boats developed between 1917 and 1918, also known in Italian as the Barchino Saltori. And these were a type of manned tracked torpedo boats that were meant to supplement the Italian mass boats or mass torpedo boats that were already in service with the Italian Navy throughout the First World War. During World War I, both the Italian and Austro-Hungarian navies were trying to figure out a way to overcome the most basic obstacle when it came to using their torpedo boats. And that obstacle was the torpedo nets, or anti-torpedo boats and anti-torpedo nets that were being used by both the Austro-Hungarian and Italian navies during the war. Now, these nets were designed to stop torpedoes, and they were also designed to stop the propellers of torpedo boats. So most of the harbors used in the First World War by both the Italian and Austro-Hungarian navies were defended by miles of anti-torpedo boat nets and anti-torpedo boat defenses. So, in the year 1917, an Italian engineer by the name of Attilio Basio, who was already working on mass torpedo boats, came up with a new system. He came up with the jumping torpedo boat, or the climbing torpedo boat, as it was called, or in Italian, the Barchino Saltori. These were also known as the Grillo, or Greeley class of tracked torpedo boats, or grasshopper in English. And these torpedo boats were fitted with a chain-like track system that would allow them to move over and cut anti-torpedo boats and anti-torpedo nets that were used to defend the harbors of the Austro-Hungarian Navy. These vessels had a displacement of 8 tons. Their main armament were two 450mm torpedo tubes. These torpedo tubes were fitted to davits that could be lowered on the side of the vessel. The secondary armament was 1 or 2 6.5mm Fiat machine guns. These vessels were made completely out of wood, and they had a very slow speed of just 4 knots or 7 kilometers per hour. And this is largely due to the fact that the engines were underpowered. Most of the engine power and the electric engine went to operating the chain-like track system. So as a result, the actual propulsion needed to push the craft was relatively weak. And as a result, these vessels had a very low speed. These vessels had a crew of 4 to 8, and they only had a maximum range of about 30 kilometers. So these vessels were pretty short-ranged when compared to the standard torpedo boats already in use by the Italian Navy. Now, the vessels were not introduced into the Italian Navy until 1918. In total, the Italians would produce about 400 of these Grillo-type tracked torpedo boats. These vessels were first used in combat in April 1918 when they were used to attack the Austro-Hungarian fleet based in the port of Pula. This is in the Adriatic Sea. During the attack, the boats proved to be too slow, and as a result, they were quickly spotted by the Austro-Hungarian coastal defense units, and they were quickly torn apart by machine gun and artillery fire. The vessels that weren't sunk were later scuttled by their crews in order to prevent them from being captured by the Austro-Hungarians, and the crews themselves later surrendered to Austro-Hungarian authorities. There was one more attack that occurred in May 1918, but this attack also failed. As a result, the Italians would go on to cancel the Grillo project, but the vessels would continue to serve all the way up until the end of the war. During the attack on Pula, the Austro-Hungarians managed to salvage at least 1 or 2 of the sunken Italian Grillo vessels, and they would take them back to Vienna, where they were reverse engineered into what the Austro-Hungarians would call the Cricket. The Cricket was the Austro-Hungarian copy of this Italian amphibious tracked torpedo boat. This vessel here used more powerful Austrian engines. The vessels were developed between August and September of 1918, and only a handful of prototypes were completed by the time the war came to an end in November 1918. So the Austro-Hungarians never got the chance to test their own version of the Grillo type of amphibious tracked torpedo boat. The Austro-Hungarian Cricket was developed by a man named Fritz Eppel. Fritz Eppel owned a ship construction yard in Vienna, and his company was tasked with creating an Austro-Hungarian equivalent of the Italian Grillo. So he quickly reverse engineered it into this variant. The Austro-Hungarian version still had a displacement of about 8 to 10 tons, and the main armament was still 2 450mm torpedo tubes and 1 or 2 8mm Swallows machine guns. The speed and armor is unknown because most of the information on the Austro-Hungarian version was lost, but the ship did have a crew of at least 4 to 8. But none of these vessels were tested before the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in late 1918. What happened to Fritz Eppel's Cricket, or the Austro-Hungarian version of the tracked torpedo boat, is unknown, but it was most likely scrapped in the interwar years. And there you have it. These were some of the strangest vessels developed by the Italians and the Austro-Hungarians towards the very end of World War I. In fact, these vessels here, the amphibious tracked torpedo boats, were kind of the predecessors to the LVT, or the Landing Vehicle Tank, which was a type of amphibious armored fighting vehicle that was later used during the Second World War by the Allied powers. The Axis powers in World War II also had a similar vehicle. So the Grillo and the Cricket were, in a sense, the forerunners of those vehicles. But what do you all think of these vehicles? Please tell me in the comment section below, and I will be covering more rare, secret, and experimental weapons and vehicles of the First World War. So until next time, this was a J-Man Time, signing off.